Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar after the summer. My name is Rina Nir, and I'm the CEO of Radby. I'm the main consultant, and I work around SDLC in Atlassian, mainly with big enterprises in regulated industries like pharma and medical technology. And I've spent big part of my summer in creating an SDLC series about SDLC in Atlassian, SDLC being software development lifecycle. And this webinar is a recap of that series. And I've invited Sarah Wright to join me here today to help me host this webinar. So, Sarah, so good that you could join me here. Sarah is an Atlassian community champion, and she is also the co-host of the Jira Live. So if anyone doesn't know what the Jira Live is, it's the biggest podcast in the Atlassian ecosystem. You can catch it up on YouTube or Spotify. And if you want to know what's going on Atlassian, that's the place to get your news from. Sarah has been an Atlassian user since 2011, and since then she has evolved her expertise around Atlassian, and now she's an Atlassian expert.
Yes,
So,
hi. Oh.
welcome,
Rena and I
Sarah.
had a pre-show, and she said, "Interrupt me, it's fine."
Yes,
So that's
yes, go.
exactly what I'm doing here. Just wanted to share, Rena and I met through the Atlassian community, and we found that we just enjoyed talking about the same things that she's talking about her SDLC series that I had signed up for. I read through it, we've had conversations about it, and we just wanted to bring the conversations out to you all as well. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you so much. And I was very thrilled to see that Sarah joined the Atlassian community event back in Charlotte, which I've done at the beginning of this summer to hear about SDLC. Then she registered to the series and she read it. So I thought, why not invite her in? It first was an honor for me that that you made time for the series, and so good to have you here. And what we're going to do today, we have maximum an hour, potentially less. We try not to make those webinars too longy. And we will first discuss the case for having software development lifecycle managed in Atlassian. When I talk about software development lifecycle in the context of the series and this webinar, I'm focusing on managing requirements and tests inside Atlassian, and also generating release documents within the platform. So it's basically the three pillars: requirements management, test management, and release documentations, all inside Atlassian, on top of your development efforts. So software development, like stories and a related development task, we are widening the platform to also support requirements, test management, and release documentation. And when I talk about release documentation, I'm sorry to spend a couple of minutes on the definitions here. When I talk about release documents, I'm talking about those type of official documents that you need to have approved, signed off as evidence for compliance or for other purposes. So not every company needs to have release documentation, but many companies do, and historically or in legacy setups, they don't do those things in Atlassian. And the whole discussion about SDLC in Atlassian is how actually do we make the platform support also this type of workload. So let's dive right in. And the first question is actually why? Why do SDLC in Atlassian? Because let's say one of the things that I hear very often is that Atlassian doesn't, Jira does not look like a requirement management platform.
Yeah, it's stories, right? It's epics and it's stories, and it's focused in those areas. And there, I think, has been a bit of a narrower view potentially of what is Atlassian for. And
Yes,
the product itself has expanded in its capabilities. And then, Rena, as you're going to walk us through, is what else can we have it do? The basis is there, the platform is there, and then it's just for us to be able to mold and shape it to our needs.
absolutely. So I think that Jira always has this dual life. It's a product, and Atlassian has done a great job in marketing Jira for software teams. Let's say you read Atlassian marketing, documentation, and everything, and as well as the feature set. So in the Jira Live, for example, recently you had a whole discussion about whether Jira needs to be more prescriptive about exactly how agile team works or not. But clearly, supporting software teams was the main focus of the whole Atlassian messaging. SDLC is not only about software development, it's also about product management and test management, at least. Yes, there's
Yes.
also the CI/CD. Uh, uh, and that actually exposes or leverages the other side of Jira, which is Jira as a platform, not Jira as a sprint board, but
Yes.
rather Jira as a very extendable, configurable, adaptable platform that one can leverage to do much more. So
Yeah.
why bother? Why do we actually want to bring SDLC into Atlassian? Um, there are different reasons. You want to say something, Sarah?
Well, I was just gonna say, one of the things that made me such a fan of the product is the fact that and using it, right, is one of the things I know you're gonna talk about is, how things have changed, how collaboration has changed. And I think there's potentially also like a mindset shift that though we might not be physically in same spaces, we can absolutely be virtually in that same space. And that space
Exactly.
happens to be Atlassian. I mean, we went from brick and mortar stores, showing up my age here at least, right? Where it's always, I'm going to go to the store and get this. And now if you ask my kids, it's, well, I'm just going to order it online. So that store, that space that we would go to is virtual. And I think a lot of that works here with Atlassian, so that if we're not together in that office, but we are together in those platforms that we're using.
Yes, absolutely. And a few themes that play into that trend of bringing your SDLC in Atlassian. The legacy systems, the old, and I'm talking about the old style, heavy, super expensive systems that used to do requirement management for us, if you were using a system like that, they are in other places. They are not in Jira or Confluence. Their integration with Jira and Confluence is possible, but always suboptimal and clunky and creates fragmentation. Other scenarios, which we still see in banks very often, I say banks just because they are still very big organizations that seem to be working very often in very archaic ways, they sometimes have the requirements in Excel files, even today in 2025. Yes.
Yes.
So if you have requirements spread in either old systems that are not in Atlassian or in Excel files, you'll always have the challenge of handover and alignment of different sources of truth and coordination between teams that work in different modalities. And each handover like that creates delay in time and opportunities for miscommunication. These are two things that we want to avoid. If we want to work quickly, and there's a lot of organization come to Jira for the agile, or at least for the aspiration to be quicker. Is it enough for a business that the software team is quicker? It's not enough. What is really important is for us to be able to deliver quicker. And for that, you need to look at the whole system and remove the friction and the handover and the miscommunication. Jira presents an opportunity because there is such a big center of gravity. So in software eats the world, and software teams are very often the critical mass of the organization in terms of the amount of people who are software engineers and who actually do the work around the release. So it makes sense to bring the test team and the product team into the place where the center of gravity already exists and not require a software team, for example, to go somewhere else.
And it's something that I think a lot about. You mentioned the word friction, making things frictionless. And for me, I kind of simplify it down into like, I don't want to have to think about a lot of things. That adds a lot of cognitive load, especially to people
Absolutely.
like me. Where do I go to find my requirements? Where do I go to find that documentation? Which of these channels or whatever it is that I'm supposed to use, and remember where everything is stored. Whereas when I have it in one place and we have practices established around that, now I'm not spending that time and that context switching. I know where I can go so I can focus on those other things where I need to, have that brain power available for me to do those things. And I want to just jump back real quickly though on the should Jira prescribe how you work, and it's a funny argument always, right? It's not Jira. It's how we configure it. It's how we
Absolutely.
use it. It's how our teams have come together to decide this is the way we're working it. And that, unlike some other tools, it does allow for that. It allows for that configuration. It allows for those changes. It allows for some of that autonomy throughout the systems. So it can be both of those things, but it can be the MVP, if you will, of what it needs to be for everybody, along with some of the other ways teams want to work.
Super. That is so, so true. And if that is all very valid, of course, in the case that you need to create release documentation. So I'm not saying everybody needs to have rigor in their requirements management. For some people, maybe stories are enough, maybe testing is happening somewhere else, not somewhere else, but in a way that is less formal. But our case here, or the focus of our webinar today, is mainly for people who need to generate or need to have release documentation as part of their delivery process. If they can't get the release document quick enough, that delays the whole development cycle. So in order for us to see a little bit where our audience here today, I created a poll. So this is an experiment, guys. It's the first time in our webinars that I'm using polling, and I will now add the poll to the stage. Why it does 1 second?
So it's going to have a QR code.
Yes,
So we're going to be ready to read that QR code
yes.
and answer this question.
So, guys, you can either check out. So you do that with your mobile phone. You scan the QR code, or you just go to this URL. The question is there, and I will now start us off. There's 24 seconds for people to tell us where they are in this. Do you have release documentation at all, and how many release documentation you have? And I do have that we have more than one person who will join and answer, but if there's only one person there, that's it. We will make it. So the audience at the moment, I don't know how many people are at the audience, but there is one person who joined us and they have a bunch of documents. So my heart goes for you, and I hope we can help you out here today. 1 second. And there's one more. We have some more answers. Good. We have 3 answers of people who have 3 documents, or mostly people who have more. So 1 second. Thank you. So that means you are in the right place, first because we will be showing and demoing and explaining a little bit how to do to manage your release documentation inside Jira to make it quicker.
Yeah, and if you didn't get to answer on that, you could always leave us a comment. Also, let us know how you are handling your release documentation right now, whether you don't do it, have a single, have multiple, or a bunch, and even curious, are they in lots and lots and lots of places? And then I'd be curious too, who's passionate about it? Who's just like, I live for this, writing release documentation. Let
That's
us
actually
know.
super cool.
So,
Mhm.
Rita, I wanted to ask a question that I know came in from somebody who had also read the series, and they wrote in, and it's a question from Ben, and he said, "Hi, Rena, congrats on the series from me too. So, one area I'd love to see explored is how Atlassian tools can support teams as they transition from startup style speed, right, really rapid, now to that enterprise level structure and governance." Striking the right balance between agility, autonomy, and standardization is a common pain point, and I'd be keen to hear how others are navigating it.
Wow, that's a thank you for the question, whoever asked it, and thank you, Sarah, for bringing it in. Uh, so that's the tension. We all live in that tension, either in this direction or the other. So this question came from someone who has a very speedy team, startup-y, and they want to become a little bit more formal. And a lot of people come the other way, so they are buried in old style formalities.
And Rena, I would say even within enterprise level, there's
Yes,
teams who are super fast. And then there's other teams who take things slower. And so even across the organization, you're going to find that variability in there.
absolutely. So first of all, what I want to say is when teams want their autonomy, it's not the platform who should, meaning the autonomy should not express itself by having a messy platform or having a platform where each team does their own thing. That's for me is not autonomy, it's chaos. I think that even in big enterprises, they need to have few Jira templates or Jira project templates. Uh, one template that is fit for projects that do not need release documentation, for example, or proof of concepts or prototypes or MVP, however the organization calls the type of speedy development that they want to allow in certain scenarios. They can have then a template for a project that requires lightweight, formality. Maybe in the case of, for example, in a pharma organization, that would be the business systems. They still need to have a certain level of control, but they don't need the GXP controls. And then you can have the one that is for the heavyweights, for the projects that really need high formality. And once you have these clusters or templates or yes, templates of structures in Jira, each new project that comes along, you need to give it the least burdensome template that this project can survive with. And don't be fixed. I mean, if you have a template that is not good enough, change it. So very often when teams come and they say they want autonomy, it's basically telling you as an admin, your template is not good enough. Isn't it the case? So, meaning if a team comes and say we want autonomy because we want to work quicker and the way that you tell us to work is not fit for purpose, you as an admin need to learn.
Well, Rena, we've had this discussion, right?
Yes,
So just in the same way requirements for software can change, and some of them become outdated. Some of them are no longer necessary. It's the same thing with your ways of working, is the ability to go in there and say, this is working for us for now, and then something changes. Yes, absolutely. I sometimes read people go, oh, and then I remembered I had free will. And it almost works in this way as well. Where we start off is the same, as things grow and evolve. So how you go from that startup style to that enterprise level, you can start in the one, and then those items evolve along with your processes.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I can mention a one of my customers, and I can say it because there's a use case, so I can say mention the fact that Sanofi, which is one of the 10 largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, they use Atlassian Cloud, and the team that manages it is called Atlassian Center of Excellence. Now think how much pride and credibility comes from this title. So if the Atlassian team in the organization is called Center of Excellence, it means that they understand that through the platform, they have a huge leverage that can push the whole organization forward. Yes. And pushing the organization forward does not mean to give each and every small team to do whatever they want, but it means that they need to provide a good level of service that enable each team to be as minimal, burdensome as possible, and as much enabled by the platform.
Yeah, and I love that word enabled. We've talked about that as well. And I was about to jump in and say it's
Ah,
about enablement, right? And I love the idea of that center of excellence. Sometimes you just get a few champions, you get a few people out there, right, trying to help other people learn about the systems that they're using, right, and doing a grassroots kind of spreading of it. But at some point, it needs to have that importance placed on it, and that
absolutely.
show of support from the organization, that the platforms that have been chosen are the ones that are going to be used, and know that, and then let people know they have resources. They have resources to go to in order to get that additional enablement and empowering those teams to do the work that they were hired to do, frankly, right? And that to get those outcomes that the organization is looking for from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think let's, in your permission, we'll move one moment to speak about one contagious issue that often comes up as people bring their requirements management into Jira. And this is the key question. I say key because it's key only for people who really speak SDLC and are very much considering how to do their digital transformation in Atlassian. And that's, we have requirements management, and then we have the agile stories. Are requirements actually stories, or are requirements something else? So let me move on to 1 second. That is our second poll. So I'm very brave today, and we have a second poll. Guys, if you can navigate to this, it's exactly the same URL, the same QR as before, and tell me how you manage your requirements in Jira, or how do you think that your requirements need to be managed in Jira? Are stories the requirements? Are epic requirements? Do you use a custom requirement work type, or do you use an app to manage your requirements? Yes. So we have two answers. The audience seems to be split between customer requirement work type and stories are requirements. That is interesting. I ran exactly the same poll on LinkedIn, and we had a bigger cohort there. There was more of a meat in the amount of answers we got, and stories are requirement was really a minority opinion. So in my so it's an interesting one, because one second, I will stop presenting that it will be easier for me. Yes, just my attention span is easier.
Right.
So I'll just give I will not park too much on it because we are a little bit short in time today. But when people start managing their requirements in Jira, one of the first stages is to decide that stories are requirements. And over time, they discover it doesn't work. So Sarah, you had actually a good explanation for that the other time when we talked, when you said that over time, how product evolves, and actually the
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, so our products aren't done per
yes,
se, right?
exactly. That's the point.
You know, and I always I love words. I love meanings of words. I love thinking about why we call things the way we do and refer to them as life cycles. And so
Exactly.
very much, you know, like the again, thinking about my kids and their life cycles and the requirements that they had as babies are obviously different as their requirements and their needs as teenagers. But we go through, right, and we cycle through each one of those areas. And software development very much does the same thing, that organizations evolve and these products evolve, and that we, in the way we support them, and the way that we have to develop towards them, and then the way we have to be cognizant of those changes that we have made and what those changes impact, and then, you know, be able to see those patterns across time too, I think is can be really helpful. And I think that's part of what your release documentation to help
Exactly.
provide that, you know, and to be able to look back and say, hey, this is where we were at this point in time. So yeah, so it really is that, you know, we talk about the word life, so something that goes on across time, and then those cycles and those iterations in between.
Exactly. And stories are basically the iterations or the delta or the work that needs to be done to bring the product to the next state. But the next state can have requirements that come from earlier stages and are basically the accumulation of everything that happened. And if you just look at stories in order to express the requirement of the product, over time you'll end up with a messy, very messy story.
And our
But
products tend not to get simpler, right? Sorry, just
no,
throwing this in. Our products don't get simpler over
no,
time. Our
no,
products get more and more complex, and they have more and more features that you know, more and more requirements to keep up with everything.
absolutely. But while I used to be almost religious about this in the past, today I recognize that for many teams, if they start by thinking that requirements are stories and that's how they want to start with their release documentation, it's a good enough place, because SDLC is like a muscle. You need to grow your muscles. And for many, many teams, just starting off creating those official release documentation is a very high learning curve. And starting with managing requirements as story is sometimes good enough and will take you away until you are ready to move on to the next stage.
And, you know, it's a shared vocabulary. It's that again, that
Absolutely.
shared way of working, so long as everybody understands. And we, you know, we've talked before also about people process tools, culture process tools, you know,
Yes.
and that fits in that it's the people and their ways of working together
Mhm.
is going to be the most important part. The other things can be configured to support those items, but when you need that in alignment first.
Absolutely. And to explain a little bit what I mean or how I see SDLC, when you separate requirements to their own entity, and one of the key reasons for me to separate requirements into a separated entity in Jira is because requirements are really at the ownership of the product manager. And product managers, business analysts, and people who own the requirements very often are not the same people who own engineering. So stories can be developed and broken down in ways that make sense to software development teams and do not map one-on-one to product requirements. So one product requirement can feed into several stories or trigger several stories, trigger some stories in this release and another story in the next release, and it's all okay. It gives the full freedom to the engineering team to manage their stories in the way that they see fit, while product still wants to see the requirement in a way that makes sense for the product, does not necessarily take into account how technically complex or convoluted the implementation can be. So sometimes a product requirement can be very simple, and under the hood, there are dozens of stories that need to be happening, and each story is then broken down to a scope that you defined is small enough to be in a story. And the way to manage it is basically having two separate work items, and each work item will have their own workflow. And one of the nice things with having everything in Jira is that this can be coordinated, and it can be also coordinated with a test for the story and for the requirement. And I will just show a diagram that speaks a little bit to this potential. So what we see on the left, sorry, I clicked. What we see on the left is a hypothetical work item, which is the requirement work item that is managed in its own project potentially. And one of the reasons to separate it also to a separate project is just to manage permission in a more easy way, because very often product teams don't like that someone else moves or
Yes.
meddles with their requirements. Yes. And the requirements is maturing as a requirement. What does it mean, maturing? The whole drafting and the description and the details that are related to the requirements are prepared by the product team and approved by the business and whoever needs to associate value with this requirement. And once it's ready for implementation, there's a push, and this push can be automatically done or manually done, depends on how you want to implement it on your Jira, and creates one story or, again, many stories. And this story goes into a sprint and is implemented during that sprint. Test management actually, in my opinion, is part of the sprint work. So when a story starts to be worked on, in parallel to the developer, also the test team becomes aware of the story, becomes aware of the requirements, and develops the tests that will eventually also test the story. And when both test and development have completed their work on the story, there is then a control point that links it back with the product owner. So the product owner can come and judge or evaluate or review the story and understand to what extent this story actually is compliant or meets the requirement that he initially has imagined in the product requirement. When all the stories that were triggered by this requirement are done here in the story level, then basically the requirement workflow is kicked, and this can be happening automatically as well, and the requirement can move into ready for user acceptance test. And this is kind of a synchronization or a handshake that can happen automatically. And that's one of the benefits of having this all in Jira, because each side of the process can see exactly what happens on the other side, and you can leverage automation so that it all flows in sync and the handovers are easier.
And so that automation gives us two things. It gives us some standardization, which, standardization, almost predictability of what's going to happen, which I think, I crave, at least other people probably crave. I know larger organizations really want that predictability on how things are going to work, because as you start getting up in your reporting, you want to be able to see that. And then the second thing is removing that friction. Once again, I don't have to think about what the next step is, because we've built these systems that enable that for us, right? It's just, I know these are the things I do with this requirement. And once that's done, some other things happen over here that I don't necessarily have to worry about. And I don't have to worry about it again until I get to that pink area. And then probably some other automation says, hey, I'm ready for
Exactly.
you. Come back over here. So, I can keep my focus where I need it to be.
Exactly. And that is meaning, I don't say that each team for itself cannot build their own automation, but just the amount of investment and thought process and experience that needs to go into having this configured just right is typically not something that exists in the level of each team by itself. So it absolutely is an undertaking of the whole organization. Okay, so it's demo time, Sarah.
Yay!
I will remove this, 1 second, book, and I will add to the stage a Confluence site, so you all um, can recognize that this is a Confluence, and this one has release documents. So that's, in my vision of SDLC and Atlassian, the role of Confluence is to be the home for the release documentation. And I just want to show this example of release documentation and talk a little bit about what exists here and how it all relies on a good configuration of the platform and a standard workflow here. So we have this is functional specification to test, so that's a traceability report. I'll just quickly go down to the traceability and show what it is. So this traceability is from functional specification. 1 second. I hope it's not too small. I will make it a little bit larger so people can see that in this specific report, we have 3 levels of issues from Jira. The top level is our functional specification. And for each issue, we have the type, the key, and the summary that is taken directly from Jira. For each functional specification issue, the traceability report shows the tests and then the latest test run. And this is, I will show in a minute exactly how it's done, but it's aggregated automatically from Jira. No one went manually into this Confluence page and populated this data. Just to prove, I will open the Jira issue. So this is a custom work item type that is defined as functional specification. And the whole traceability and coverage is built simply by using the related work item, so the links that inherently exist in Jira. But we, of course, added custom link types. For example, we have mitigates that links this functional specification to a risk. We have traces up that takes us higher into our requirements. So in this particular example, our requirements are hierarchical. We have user requirements as high-level requirements and then functional specification. And downward in our traceability, this functional specification, which is GAL 19, is tested by a bunch of tests. So these tests are X-ray test types. The test management suite that I'm using for SDLC is X-ray test management for Jira. And here at the bottom of this link list, we have the relationship with stories. So the function specification is linked to the stories, and every time that the product manager comes over here and checks what's happening, he can clearly see what's going on with the stories and where they are, but he's not limited by the story. It's only one of the many relationships that exist here in Jira for this particular functional specification. And what happens in Confluence, this table is a snapshot table. Snapshot is an app that Radby brings to the marketplace. And this snapshots app relies on configurations here by the person who created the Confluence page to bring in the specific collection of hierarchy into Confluence page in a point of time. So the data that you see here will not change when Jira data changes. So that makes it very useful for release documentation, because in the scenario of release documents, we want to take the snapshot of Jira data at the point that the release is ready. So we are ready to release. We have completed our tests. We have completed all our stories. The requirements are ready. We tested everything. And what we want is just to generate, for example, function specification to test. Why? Because this is one of the set of maybe 10 or maybe 20 documents that we need to create with every release. So we have this page ready in advance with a purpose, with a scope, with all the verbiage that we need to have in advance. We don't need to do that in the last minute. The only thing that we need to do in the last minute is to take a new snapshot. And once we press this button, the data from Jira is refreshed. The person who needs to review the document can then see the whole layout here exactly in the same way that is convenient for him. He doesn't need to dig into Jira, for example, and look at the whole link here and to investigate all the relationship in Jira. He just sees it here. If they want also to understand what happens or what changed between this version and the previous version, they can just press compare. And this compare goes and compares what we have now with what we have taken earlier. So I took a few hours ago another snapshot, and since then the data in Jira has changed, and I can easily see what changed in Jira and have a sanity check that what I see here in terms of data is what I expect, or maybe I haven't seen this and I know that this is new now. Okay, and the whole e-signature can happen also in Confluence. So for example, this document control table is 100% automated inside Confluence. And I have a place to electronically sign to the extent that I need to sign. So in this case, in this example, 2 people need to sign, and there is a place for 2 signatures. And as soon as the document is ready, I will take it all the process, all the way from draft to approval. I'm not going to dive very deep into the approval process here. It's just a pointer to show that this is all possible inside the Atlassian ecosystem. And if I could generate this complex release document inside Confluence, basically any release document. And I have examples here in my sandbox for other types of documents. And basically, big enterprises with a complex product generates dozens of the whole release documentation that they need based on templates like these inside Confluence, connect it all to Jira, and benefit from the fact that when all the data is in Jira, all the SDLC in Jira, then the release documentation really becomes a piece of cake.
So real quick, so when we have our, when Jira's configured in such a way, and we have all of those relationships, and then we have documentation like this out in Confluence, and those things are automated. The other thing that we have is reliability and speed, right? We have our
Absolutely.
standardization, but what this also does that we didn't talk about is how quickly you can go now because you have all of those parameters preset for you.
Yes, absolutely. So that when you want to be in a position that you want to release quickly, you want to have this machine ready to go. Yes.
Earlier,
That's
I think you mentioned the word chaos, right? You
yes,
have chaos when you don't have a lot of those things in place. So this takes us from that chaotic place, right, into order and again predictability about things.
absolutely. So that's basically a very quick preview of how SDLC and Atlassian can look like. Of course, the terminology, whether you use functional specification or user needs or whatever, you can use whatever terminology works for you. Yes, so that's the demo.
Well, speaking of things that work for you, I did hear you mention a couple of apps, and I know that's a pretty frequent thing. Is we know while it is the platform that can do so much, it also cannot do everything. But there are things that we can bring in, some other apps that go along when we work within Atlassian. And so, what are the ones that you recommend?
Absolutely, thank you. So yes, that's the power and the ugliness as well. In order to create SDLC in Atlassian, you need to use a lot of the power from what the marketplace gives you. So it's ugly because people sometimes don't like to make the effort to choose and pick, and it's too many decisions to make. So for that purpose, I created this list, and it's available in the SDLC series, and it will be available in the SDLC white paper that we are going to publish later on this week. And of course, you see it here now. So anybody who comes back to this webinar later on can see this list. So this is my preferred apps for setting up SDLC in Atlassian. The highlights here, really X-ray test management for Jira. You can't go wrong with it. It's not perfect. Some people find it hard to study. There is a complexity there, etc. But really, it's built. It's a sophisticated tool that is built for sophisticated products, and you can take it as simple and as complex as you want. It's my favorite in terms of test management in Jira. And then there is a snapshot, which I must plug in again because it's our app, but it's also the one that really makes release documents such a breeze in Confluence. So if you do SDLC in Jira, you have to solve your release document issue. And the best solution out there is using snapshots. And it's two apps because it's the second one that provides the integration with X-ray. Not everybody needs the deep integration with X-ray, but if you need it for SDLC, definitely this is the case. You'll need to take this one too. And the others are here. I will not park too much of it because we're running out of time, but you have the list here. Okay. One second.
And that's excellent because that's going to shortcut it, and Rena's done a lot of talking about the series and that I had subscribed to as well and read through it. And one of my biggest takeaways from the series is, complimenting her in front of her, which I know some people might get a little shy about. Hopefully Rena will not. But it really just felt so doable, that she walks you through every step of what it would take in order to get into this higher level and higher ways of working. And that these would work, like, imagine you're a startup and you get to start with this kind of process from the very beginning. Or it takes you all the way through. What if you already have established projects and ways of working? What do you do to go through to reconfigure your Atlassian products in order to start using a system like this? It includes those apps. It includes a lot of practical advice and a lot of insight. And it's done in such a way that it builds on itself, which is great. And if you go through and decide to take on the steps that are mentioned in there, you actually start doing that SDLC as you build your own product, right? As you build your own SDLC product inside of the Atlassian products. And you get a chance to almost already practice some of the things that she's suggested by doing it on your own. And so that's a whole series, super easy sign up, and I can't wait for the white paper.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And now I will mention that we are not only two here today, we have a third very important person here, Saskia, who is helping produce those webinars with me. And she was sitting on our Q&A list. Saskia, what have you got for us
Yes.
in terms of Q&A?
I did get quite some responses even before the webinar when we announced it, especially around the requirements management. A lot of those were statements very much agreeing with you, basically along the lines of crappy requirements can be crappy in quite some way. So there's probably a whole webinar just in like how to deal with all the crappy requirements. But I just want to pick up one question that we got also before the webinar, which was asking more if you could maybe both comment, share your experience around configuration management and how to clone instances. That was a question that seemed very interested and urgent also, if I may add.
Yes. So what I can say is that Atlassian does not make it super easy to do configuration management for Atlassian. That I must admit. So there are three ways around it. One is to document, and really I often use X-Ray. So when I hand over a configuration to customers, I write what in pharma sometimes is called the IQ, installation qualification, and but basically an installation runbook that goes into the whole detail. The problem with that is that it's not super easy to maintain. So once I hand it over, I know it's okay, but then someone does a small change here, a small change there, and suddenly you have a system that is a little bit off from the instructions. And it's so in terms of automation, there are two apps you could check. One is Revise. So the backup app from Revise also provides, to some extent, capture of the configuration. And then another solution you can check is the one that comes from Salto. So Salto is a configuration management software that can integrate with Atlassian and capture the whole configuration of Atlassian with JSON files, or they have actually their own language. I'm a little bit reserved in those recommendations just because I don't know how well they will capture also the configuration that is in the apps. So yes, center of excellence means that you need to go and do a little bit of homework with these three options, check out the one that best works for you, and create a habit or a practice to solve that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to agree with Rena. I'd say, we've been seeing some signs also from Atlassian regarding backups and restores, but I don't know that they could be used for, that instance to instance
Configuration.
configuration management. There's a lot TBD on that arena. But, and again, that's why all that documentation helps so much. So you can go back in there and find what you need to get those things set up.
Excellent. Thank you both for that. That's been all from my side.
Okay, excellent. So that actually brings us to the closing comments. And I'm going to put here just quickly the fact that anybody here is invited, of course, to connect with me on LinkedIn, to follow our page. So Radby also has the page that this event is run on the Radby page. So you can follow the page, but also connect with me personally. There is the SDLC series, which we have mentioned several times here. This is a long series. It's 9 articles that you can really give you kind of a recipe of how to start with SDLC and Atlassian. And there's a white paper, which is basically a compressed version of the series. And this is going to go out a little bit later this week. So if you are interested, leave a message on the stream on LinkedIn or on our page, or just leave a message to me directly, and I will make sure to give you the link to where you supposed to register to get those things. I should have probably have the links here, but I'm still the white paper especially is not out yet. It will be out tomorrow, I guess, or the day after. So we'll have the link then. What else are we expecting later this year? We will probably have a webinar in October. I say probably just because October is a pretty busy week with travel and conferences, etc. But we might have a good webinar about test management. I say test management because I'm presenting in a conference at the end of the month, and my head will be totally in test management in October. So if I will do a webinar, it will be about test management. And then in November, we'll have a webinar about the one buzzword that we did not mention today, but everybody is mentioning nowadays, which is AI. So I will finally be ready, I think, by November to say something about AI in the relationship to SDLC and Atlassian, and generally speaking, AI in compliance on the Atlassian platform. So watch out if you want to be invited. Follow our page, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll not miss it out.
Awesome. And I just want to say thanks for letting me hang with you for an hour today.
Sarah, it was
and revisit some of these topics.
It was so good to have you here. I think that maybe I'll come for some more in a future event. I'm keeping the door open to some more.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Take care, and see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.